Klingons stopped using one trick against Starfleet after Star Trek VI. When Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country premiered in 1991, it marked a turning point for both the Star Trek franchise and the Klingon Empire. As the Cold War allegory played out in space, the Klingons and the Federation inched toward a peace that had long seemed impossible. But tucked inside that story of diplomacy, assassination, and Kirk's reluctant evolution was something else. One of the most devastating tactical tricks the Klingons ever used against Starfleet, and the last time we ever saw it happen. After the events of Star Trek VI, Klingons abandoned one of their most iconic battlefield advantages, and the reasons why reveal a lot about Klingon honor, Starfleet ingenuity, and how the galaxy itself was changing. The cloaking trick that defined Klingon warfare. Since their introduction, Klingons were never just warriors with disruptors and bat'leths. They were cunning strategists who leaned on one of the most terrifying pieces of technology in the Alpha Quadrant, the cloaking device. With it, Klingon ships could vanish from sensors in sight, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. For Starfleet, whose doctrine relied heavily on detection and calculated engagement, the cloak was the ultimate nightmare. Throughout Star Trek, the original series and into the next generation, Klingons used cloaking to gain the element of surprise. Ambushes, border incursions, and intimidation tactics all relied on the cloak. But Star Trek VI introduced a terrifying evolution of this tactic, the bird of prey commanded by General Chang, which could fire its weapons while cloaked. This wasn't just a small advancement. It was the equivalent of turning an already invisible enemy into an invisible sniper who could strike from anywhere, anytime, without warning. For the first time in the franchise, the cloak wasn't just an ambush tool, it was a weapon in and of itself. General Chang's phantom bird of prey. Christopher Plummer Shakespeare, quoting General Chang, wasn't just a Klingon villain. He was a tactician pushing Klingon warfare into uncharted territory. His modified bird of prey, which could fire torpedoes while cloaked, was the stuff of Starfleet's worst nightmares. When the Enterprise A and the Excelsior faced Chang in the Battle of Khitomer, they were effectively blind. Every photon torpedo and phaser burst was wasted against empty space while Chang pounded them with relentless precision strikes. It looked, for a time, like Kirk and his crew would be destroyed not by numbers, but by one ship exploiting a technological edge no Federation ship could counter. Chang's innovation seemed like the ultimate escalation of the cloak, one that would cement Klingon dominance for generations. And yet, after The Undiscovered Country, the tactic vanished from Star Trek history. By the time of The Next Generation, Klingons were still using cloaking devices, but never again did we see a bird of prey fire while cloaked. Why? Kirk and Spock's countermeasure changed everything. The answer lies in the desperate ingenuity of the Enterprise crew. While Chang gleefully quoted Shakespeare and toyed with his prey, Spock and McCoy worked out a way to level the playing field, targeting the bird of prey's exhaust. Every cloaked vessel had to emit plasma at some point, and by modifying a torpedo to home in on that exhaust signature, they turned Chang's invincible advantage into a fatal weakness. The specially modified torpedo found its mark, crippling Chang's ship and allowing the Enterprise and Excelsior to finish the fight. That one moment reshaped how cloaking technology was viewed, not just by Starfleet, but by the Klingons themselves. Why Klingons abandoned the firing cloak tactic? At first glance, you'd think Klingons, proud warriors who love overwhelming their enemies, would continue refining Chang's innovation. But several cultural and tactical reasons explain why they never did. 1. It was no longer a surprise. The power of the firing cloak depended on its secrecy. Once Starfleet had developed the countermeasure, the Federation could adapt across its fleet. What was once a game-breaking weapon became a liability. Klingons valued decisive advantage in battle, and if the element of surprise was gone, so was the point. 2. It violated Klingon honor. Klingons often walk a fine line between pragmatism and their warrior code. Firing from complete invisibility crossed that line. Unlike ambushes or one-on-one duels, the firing cloak was viewed as dishonorable, a coward's weapon. Chang himself was seen as a radical within the Empire, willing to betray both honor and peace for his own agenda. Once he was defeated, his methods were dismissed as unworthy of true Klingons. 3. The tech was inherently flawed. Chang's bird of prey was a prototype, not a fleet standard vessel. It required modifications that were difficult to replicate and dangerous to maintain. Running weapon systems while cloaked created feedback and energy strain, and once Starfleet knew to look for exhaust trails, the cloak became a beacon rather than a shield. In a galaxy where resources were already stretched thin, the Klingon High Council had no interest in throwing resources at a flawed design. 4. Geopolitical shifts made it obsolete. After the Khitomer Accords, the Federation and the Klingons entered into an uneasy alliance. Starfleet was no longer the enemy, at least not openly. Deploying firing cloaked birds of prey would have signaled a betrayal of that alliance and risked restarting a costly war. Klingon leaders preferred to keep their ships cloaked for reconnaissance and intimidation rather than escalate tensions. The ripple effect across Star Trek history. The abandonment of Chang's trick didn't just change Klingon tactics, it rippled across the entire franchise timeline. By Star Trek, The Next Generation, cloaks had returned to their traditional use: stealth, surveillance, and surprise attacks. The Romulans, Klingons' longtime rivals, perfected cloaking technology but never attempted the same firing cloak tactic, at least not on screen. The closest we came was in Star Trek Nemesis, where the scimitar used Bajoran weapons and advanced cloaking fields, but even then, the cloak wasn't used as a firing platform. This retreat from the firing cloak solidified a balance of power. The Federation knew how to counter cloaked ships, Klingons retained the honor of face-to-face combat, and the galaxy avoided a new arms race that could have destabilized everything. What it says about Klingons as a people? The disappearance of the firing cloak after Star Trek VI tells us something deeper about Klingon identity. Klingons have always been written as a paradox: savage but honorable, brutal yet loyal, technologically advanced yet bound by ancient codes. Chang's ship represented the temptation to abandon those codes for victory at any cost. But when he fell, the Klingon Empire reaffirmed what really mattered: honor in combat, not invisible slaughter. This choice separated them from other galactic powers. The Romulans leaned into espionage and secrecy, using cloaking for deception. The Dominion and the Borg favored overwhelming force and ruthlessness. But the Klingons? They chose to fight where their enemies could see them coming, roaring into battle with disruptors blazing. Abandoning the firing cloak preserved their cultural identity, even as it limited their military options. Could the firing cloak return? In modern Star Trek, with shows like Strange New Worlds, Lower Decks, and Discovery exploring new corners of canon, the question lingers: could the firing cloak make a comeback? It's possible. Klingon radicals or splinter houses could rediscover the tech, forcing Starfleet into another arms race. The idea of a dishonorable,